I've had a couple of inquiries about these quick fills and gauges for Gamos like the Phox and various other rifles. I'm going to show you quickly. I'm going to be adding a O-ring kit to my eShop for these. Basically drain down the air from the rifle, and then once that's all been removed, you can then unscrew this gauge body. It's a big lump of brass from your air cylinder, which will get you to here. The first thing you want to do is remove the gauge. If that's tight, you can use an adjustable spanner or a 22mm spanner. That should loosen it off. That brings you to a steel part. Again, this could be tight. If it is, you can use a 22mm spanner. There's a couple of flats on here that you can put the spanner onto. Remove that. Now you'll notice there's one big O-ring on there, and then there's another smaller O-ring in there, which you can remove. And then if you look inside there, there's the gauge O-ring, which you can also remove. It's quite well jammed in there. There we go. And then there's another O-ring on the actual body itself, which can be removed. There we go. So there's 4 O-rings. That's it. So what you want to do is clean everything, make sure it's spotless. You can use cotton buds and things to get into all the nooks and crannies. And then you, once you're happy it's all clean, you can get your new kit. Just make sure you get rid of the old ones so that you don't get confused. Right, this is where you can use something like Abbey SM50 or silicone lube. Just a little dab on the O-ring. Push that in. These are normally a little bit tight, so you need to kind of push them in with something. I suppose you could use a pencil or an Allen key or something, just to gently push it down to the bottom of the hole. There we go. And then once you're happy that's in, you can then put a drop of SM50 or something similar on the threads and in the O-ring groove. With the smaller thin O-ring, roll that in. There we go. And then that screws back into there. Just nip it up. And the O-ring does the sealing, so you don't have to tighten it too tight. And once you're happy that's on, you put a little drop of SM50 in the O-ring groove, and put the bigger thin O-ring in there. That holds the cover in place. And then another couple of drops of SM50 in the O-ring groove, then the big O-ring goes on. And that's the valve serviced. You can then screw your pressure gauge back in. What you'll notice with these is this screws down onto the big little fat O-ring that we put in the bottom of that hole. If you put air in, basically if you over tighten this, what will happen is either the gauge won't read anything when there's air in the cylinder, or it'll be stuck like this one is on where's that, about 140 bar. This gauge is actually faulty, but if you find that your gauge is stuck even though the pressure inside the air cylinder is changing, it's normally a sign that you've over tightened this. You'll find if you back it off a bit, the gauge will normally drop back down to 0 like that one is. So yeah, just be careful of that. If you over tighten this, the gauge will lock up and it won't read. Because effectively what you're doing is squashing the O-ring and then closing up the hole in the bottom of the gauge, which then means it doesn't work. I have done a video on servicing the fill valve on these. I can quickly go over that now. Wasn't planning to, but And just make sure you keep your finger over the end. Pop the pin out. Be careful because it's spring loaded. There's a washer, a spring, and then there's a plastic valve seat. Just make sure that this is spotless. If you are getting leaks out of the fill valve, it may be that there's a bit of debris caught in this plastic valve. The other thing you can do is use a cotton bud or something similar just to clean the port out. Make sure there's no bits of O-ring or other rubbish caught up in there, and give it all a good clean, and make sure it's all good. And then just inspect it visually, just make sure that there's no scratches or marks in the end where this seals, otherwise it will leak. And once you're happy that's all done, inspect that as well, make sure it's all clean and clear. If there are any marks or scratches or dents in it, you will need to either polish them out to get rid of the marks, otherwise it won't seal, or you'd need to replace this. Right, pop that back in, pop the spring back on, and the washer goes back on, and then you need to push it down, it's a bit fiddly, and then pop the pin back in, make sure the pin's going over the washer, not like that. There we go. Just use that just to push the other side down. I'm making a job of this. Just make sure the pin goes all the way in. There we go. And that's it, serviced. Like I said, these kits will be available in the eShop on my website shortly. And yeah, once you're happy it's all done, pop it back in, and then fill your rifle, and happy shooting. Oh, the other thing that I normally do when I'm working on these is you'll notice when they're new, this one hasn't been done, these edges are extremely sharp. I mean, you could cut yourself on them, and often what happens is when you're putting the probe in and out, you shave bits of probe O-ring off. It's extremely sharp, so you can use like a little polishing burr to try and polish off the edges, or you can use a little file or some wet and dry or something just to knock the edges off, so that it's not so sharp, because yeah, it's a bit of a liability. So that's always worth doing if you've got the time. Obviously, if you're going to do that before you put it all back together with all the new O-rings and things, because there will be bits of brass dust and what have you, which you'd need to clean off, thoroughly. Otherwise, all that'll happen is you'll get leaks, either in this or in the rifle, because all the bits will work their way into the rifle. So there we go.